between the two and just the general makeup of the nervous system, as well as the anatomy of the neuron and the neuroglia. All right, so getting started, the things in dark pink right here are the brain and spinal cord. That is your central nervous system. Everything that is in blue, all of these side things going off everywhere, that is your peripheral nervous system, okay? Central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord for the most part. Peripheral is all of the rest of the nervous system, which is a lot of nerves, okay? The nervous system is divided into two main categories, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is composed of the brain, the spinal cord and their coverings, and the peripheral nervous system is made up of the cranial nerves, spinal nerves, and ganglia, which are bundles of nerves. We'll also learn about bundles of nerves called a plexus, but we're going to dive into detail about that next week. This image here is not the body, but it is a graph to show you how the nervous system is divided, hopefully a little bit easier. There's a ton happening with the peripheral nervous system. You can see the nervous system main up there in green, and then it's divided into two sections, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system then again divides into two, the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system again divides into two, the parasympathetic division and the sympathetic division. And so we are going to talk about those real quick. All right. The peripheral nervous system has two main subdivisions, all right up there at the, well, in the middle, technically. So peripheral is in orange, and then you see it drops down into autonomic and somatic nervous system. The somatic subdivision monitors and controls the bones, the muscles, soft tissues, and skin. The word somatic is derived from the Greek somatikos, meaning of the body. So these are your voluntary skeletal muscles. Your somatic system is what you can control with your mind. Hey, I want my skeleton to move this way, so I'm telling my bicep to tighten so that my arm flexes upwards, all right? You are telling it what to do. It is your voluntary, all right? They do it because you have told them to do it. They're not doing it of their own free will, independently from your will, okay? You can control these muscles. You control the somatic nervous system. Also, skin sensations. This is where we pick up feelings when we're being massaged by people, all right? The sensations we feel on our skin, the pressure that we're getting, the way that our muscles feel being manipulated, this is all in the somatic nervous system. Now, the autonomic subdivision is also called the visceral, all right? The visceral or autonomic subdivision is associated with the internal glands, organs, blood vessels, and mucous membrane. The word viscera is from Latin, and it's plural for viscus, which means internal organ. Autonomic is from the Greek word autonomia, meaning independence. So when you combine the meanings, you get independence of internal organs. The autonomic nervous system was named that way because it was originally believed to act completely independently. However, although it can operate without conscious control, it is regulated by parts of the brain, and much of the interaction between the body and mind takes place through autonomic nervous system activity. The autonomic nervous system is subdivided even further, which we're going to talk about in just a second. But what that means is yes, when you fall asleep, your brain and your body control your breathing. It takes over. You don't have to worry about dying from lack of breath unless you have a severe disorder of some type, or like a really bad case of apnea, because your body takes over and controls your breathing. But you know that you can also control your breath. So in some ways, parts of the autonomic nervous system are also voluntary because of the power of the mind. That's pretty cool. I won't dive into that tangent, but Mrs. Ellis could nerd out on that all day. All right. The autonomic nervous system is subdivided into the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the enteric systems. All right. I don't have enteric up here, but we will talk about that in just a minute. The sympathetic ANS activates arousal responses, and expends body resources in response to emergencies, excitement, or exercise. The sympathetic ANS is considered the fight, fight, fear system, but any highly emotional state of joy, excitement, or elation is also sympathetic in nature. So your sympathetic system kicks you into stress overdrive, happiness overdrive, all of those things. It gets your adrenaline going, all right? It's what activates when you think you're about to get mugged is your sympathetic division. The parasympathetic division is what a lot of people call rest and digest. All right, it reverses the response of the sympathetic ANS by returning the body to a non-alarm state, restoring body resources. The parasympathetic ANS is considered the rest and digest system. All right, so it means that when you are freaked out and stressed and your sympathetic system is just going nuts, then when you start to relax, you calm down, you've got a feedback loop happening with your hormones, your cortisol levels going down. That's your parasympathetic division kicking in and calming you down. When you get massaged, your parasympathetic division gets kicked on and you start to relax. Massage affects the parasympathetic division. You feel massage physically in the somatic nervous system, but you respond to relax and have hormonal responses to massage in the parasympathetic division. Okay. Remember that because you will get asked with the MBLEX, you know, what part of the nervous system does massage affect? And they're usually looking for parasympathetic division when they ask that question. You feel it in the somatic nervous system, but it is affecting the parasympathetic division of the nervous system the most. All right. The enteric system is the least talked about part of the nervous system. We're not going to go crazy about it, but it is good to know, especially when we talk about the digestive system later on in this class. The enteric nervous system is the third part of the autonomic nervous system. Enteric means pertaining to the intestines, and it is derived from the Greek word enterikos, meaning intestinal. All right. The ENS has an extensive two-way connection with the central nervous system. It works in concert with the central nervous system to control the digestive system in the context of local and whole body physiological demand. The enteric nervous system is composed of thousands of small ganglia that lie within the walls of the esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines, pancreas, gallbladder, and biliary tree. The biliary, words are hard for Mrs. Ellis. The biliary tree is a system of vessels that directs digestive juices from the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder through a common bile duct into the small intestine. All right. The ganglia contain neurons and glial cells. It is believed that the enteric nervous system contains as many neurons, a neuron is a nerve cell, by the way, we'll talk about it in a minute, as many neurons as the entire spinal cord. It also contains multiple plexuses, which are groups of intertwined nerves that function together. A large nerve, a super important one for massage therapists, the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve that comes directly from the brain. It supplies most of the abdominal viscera, among other structures and organs, and plays a role in the ENS functions. You're going to hear about the vagus nerve, especially if you want to do continuing education later on about people that are suffering from trauma and they're trying to release stored trauma in the body. All right, this is a very concept that is becoming less, quote, woo-woo and much more scientifically based. And there is a ton of research on how the vagus nerve and vagal nerve relaxation really helps to get that trauma out of the body. Okay. So this is something that you definitely want to jot down in your notes to perhaps study later if you are interested in doing trauma work for sure. All right. the second part of today's lecture. Promise you, we're almost over. Describe the anatomy and physiology of the neuron and neuroglia. Sure will. Neurons are information messengers, all right? They use electrical and chemical signals to send information between different areas of the brain, as well as between the brain, the spinal cord, and the entire body. Neurons are nerve cells. They are nerve cells. When we say a nerve cell, that's a neuron. That's what we're talking about. And this is what a simple one looks like. The function of the neurons is to receive and transmit electrical signals from and to neurons, muscles, or glands. They also receive neurotransmitters sometimes, which is a chemical messenger. If we were talking about the endocrine system, which we will later, that would be called a hormone. All right. Nerve cells consist of a cell body and its nerve fibers, the axons and the dendrite. The axon is this long skinny thing here going out. And then we have dendrites, which look like these branching coral pieces coming off. In fact, they're even called dendritic branches towards the end. The cell body contains a nucleus, and it has organelles, just like any other type of cell in the human body. All right, that we talked about in MTC 105. Remember all the little organs, that's what organelles mean. The dendrites, which look like small hairs, or to me, a coral reef, are extensions of the cytoplasm of the cell. Their job is to receive signals and then carry them into the cell body. The axon, which is that long string-looking thing connecting everything there, is an elongated projection that carries signals away from the cell body. An axon may have branches known as collaterals that allow communication among several neurons. So this is the cell over here. I don't know if you can see my mouse circling. And then these dendrites that are branching out, they take in the information, and then it goes, after it's like computed what it wants to compute, it sends it out through the axon. And then we have all of these little tentacles sort of coming out. We're going to talk in a minute about where they end, but they can branch out like it is here. It's only going to one synaptic terminal there, but it could go to several other neurons. We could have a couple of axons spreading out. You will see this in just a moment, but it comes in through the dendrites. Information comes in through the dendrites into the cell body, and then it goes through the axon to exit the body of the cell. All right, here is another image here of a neuron. All right, so we have all these synapses down at the end where they're connecting. Axon terminals are where the axon terminates at the end of its various branching sort of little tentacles at the end here. You see this segmented long section. That entire thing is a nerve fiber. That entire thing is an axon, okay? It's covered with a myelin sheath to protect it. It sort of covers it, sort of like the way that like plastic insulation covers up your copper charging cable so that you don't have a bare electrical wire sticking out. It's the same thing here. This myelin sheath is protecting this long nerve fiber, this axon, all right? Neurons are identified by structure or by function in your book, all right? The simplest way to classify them is on basis of function, all right? So there's like three main types. There's a sensory neuron. And remember, when we say neuron, we mean nerve cell. A sensory nerve cell detects stimuli from the internal environment, like a decline in the water level in your blood, and from external, like the warmth of the sun. Then they send this information to the central nervous system, okay? Like you touch a hot stove, that's like, it sends that signal to your brain from the sensory neurons. The interneurons are connecting or associative neurons. They integrate the sensory information, analyze it, store some of it, and make a decision for appropriate responses. This is why the vagus nerve is important. They analyze it, store some of it, they keep that information in the body, and make a decision for appropriate responses. Motor neurons carry nerve impulses from the central nervous system, from the brain and spinal cord, out to the effectors. Effectors is the other word for your muscles and your glands. The things that are going to do the reacting are the effectors, all right? In response to decisions made by the CNS. Stimulation of the effectors causes muscles to contract and glands to secrete. Okay, so what this basically means is, all right, you're smelling something delicious and you reach out to touch it and it's burning hot on the stove. You have burned yourself. Sensory neurons have told your brain, this smells delicious. Also, this is extremely hot and we're in excruciating pain. Interneurons are like, this is interesting. It smells good. I'll keep this memory here that this particular food smells good. Also, I'm going to keep the memory in the body that stoves are hot, touchy, bad. And then it sends all that information to the brain while keeping some of it for itself as a memory. The motor neurons are then sending out information after the brain has been like, holy crap, take your hand off the stove. So then the motor neuron races out to the hand muscles and the arm muscles, jerk back, it's hot. Okay, so it is telling the body, the effectors, the muscles and the glands what to do. At the same time, less important, motor neurons are telling your mouth to salivate because it smells so good while you're also burning your hand. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on at the body at once, but it's the sensory neurons taking it in, the inner neurons thinking about it, the central nervous system, meaning the brain and the spinal cord, are like, hey, this is what we're going to do about it. They send it out to the motor neurons. The motor neurons say, hey, look, this is what the body has to do as a reaction right now. All right, here's an image of a couple of them, because we can have multipolar neurons, bipolar neurons. Your book describes these. I'm not concerned about you really memorizing this right now, but I would like you to be aware that there are different shapes to these neurons right now. We will get into them a little bit later. All right, now, neuroglia, also called a glial cell or glia, all right, are any type of, several types of cells actually that function primarily to support the neurons. This is the other type of cell in the nervous system that we need to know about. The term neuroglia literally means nerve glue, all right? There was a biologist in 1907 that suggested that neuroglial cells exchange substances with the extracellular fluid, and in this way exert control on the neuronal environment, meaning it is sort of conversing chemically and with the food and various things that the nerve cells, the neurons, are taking in and out, and they are literally controlling the environment around this neuron. It has since been shown that glucose, sugar, amino acids, and ions, all of which influence neuronal function, are indeed exchanged in the extracellular space and neuroglial cells. For instance, after high levels of neuronal activity, right, that's after your nervous system has been working overtime for some reason, there's been some crisis, something's happening, maybe you're having to think a lot, having to listen to this lecture. The neuroglial cells can take up and spatially buffer potassium ions and maintain normal neuronal function, all right? Potassium is super important, not just for your heart, but it also controls the electrical conductivity inside of your body and how they interact with each other, how fast they can interact. And when there's been a ton of activity and you've burned through a lot of this stuff and you need more potassium ions, the neuroglial cells are here to help you out. Neuroglia exceed the number of neurons in the nervous system by at least 10 to 1. So not only in MTC 105 did you learn that you are 10 bacterial cells to 1 human cell, now we know that neuroglia, these glial cells, are 10 to 1 in your nervous system. These things that are controlling your nervous system aren't even your nerves. 10 to 1. Neuroglia exist in the nervous systems of invertebrates as well as vertebrates and can be distinguished from neurons by their lack of axons and by the presence of only one type of process. They can only do one thing. They also do not form synapses, which you will talk about later in detail. And they retain the ability to divide throughout their entire lifespan. All right. You are born with the number of nerve cells that you are going to be born with. Once a nerve cell is completely severed or is dead, you don't get it back. You can form new nerve pathways to be able to have your nervous system communicate, but your nerve cells are what you have, period. But neuroglia can continue to divide and create more. All right. So while neurons and neuroglia lie in close opposition to one another, there are no direct junctional specializations, such as gap junctions between the two types. They don't specifically communicate. We just looked at those dendrites. We just looked at those axon terminals. Neurons talk to other neurons. And they talk to like glands of muscles. Neurons don't talk to the neuroglia. The neuroglia control the nerves and how they function and what they do by starving them or feeding them, but they don't actually directly communicate at all. There are communication gap junctions between the neuroglial cells. The neuroglial cells talk to each other. All right. There are two groups of cells that we just talked about, neurons and neuroglia. Neurons, of course, transmit the electrical signals around the body, while neuroglia function to provide nourishment and support and control of the neurons. There's a number of different types of neuroglia within the central and peripheral nervous systems, and they are different from each other. All right, they play distinct functional roles in supporting the activity of neurons. So the neuroglia in the central nervous system, which is the system we're focused on this week, there are 4 types in the central nervous system, all right? There's the astrocytes, okay? They are right here in the purple that I am circling, all right? They look like they got little crabby claws on them. They maintain the blood-brain barrier and preserve the chemical environment by recycling ions and neurotransmitters. We're making sure that the right things are going to the brain and that it's getting enough of them, all right? There are oligodendrocytes, oligodendrocytes. Sound it out with Mrs. Ellis because words are hard. Oligodendrocytes. They myelinate axons in the central nervous system and provide an overall structural framework. Epididymal cells, they line the ventricles in the brain. So you have ventricles you're going to learn about later, which are like hollow cavities in the brain that fill with fluid to maintain pressure. All right. And central canal, the spine, the canal that is filled with the cerebral spinal fluid that your spine sits in, and are involved in the production of cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, there is going to be cerebral spinal fluid that controls pressure. It controls the nutrients and stuff going to the brain. This is very important stuff. People call it liquid gold when you go to pull it. It is called the nectar of the gods for some people when we're talking about human function. This is the creme de la creme of body fluids is this cerebral spinal fluid. And these epididymal cells are the ones that line the ventricles of the brain and the central canal and produce this cerebral spinal fluid. They are important to your body. There are microglia as well, which remove cell debris, okay? They're like the lysosome of the normal cell, all right? This is like the lysosome of the nervous system here. The microglia remove cell debris, waste, and pathogens via phagocytosis. So actually we could say they're like the white blood cell. We're going to talk about white blood cells more in the circulatory system, but know that your white blood cells eat other things, okay? Neuroglia in the PNS. There are 2 types of neuroglia found within the peripheral nervous system. Those are Schwann cells. They myelinate axons in the peripheral nervous system, all right? They help with those myelin sheaths that we looked at. And there are satellite cells. And these regulate nutrient and neurotransmitter levels around neurons in ganglia. Okay, that's very important because if you are taxing your nervous system and you need some extra nutrients to be able to keep functioning right away, these satellite cells come in and they're like, oh, hey, let me help you out. And they bring some extra food. They're like the caterers of the entire body's nervous system to bring them the nutrients and the hormones In this case, when we're talking about the nervous system, the hormones are called neurotransmitters. They're going to bring those neurotransmitters to make sure that we can get the things done that we need to get done. All right, that is all I have for you guys today. Have an excellent day. I know that that was kind of a lot to take in, but we are diving into one of the most complicated systems. So complicated, we're going to take 2 weeks to cover it. All right, have an excellent evening, and I will talk with you guys tomorrow.